Welcome to Looks Good on Paper, the podcast that's flipping the script on traditional hiring. We're your hosts, I'm Woody.
And I'm Anita.
And in each episode, we dive into why CVs and the so-called perfect candidate can be misleading. We'll be speaking with industry experts to uncover how skills, potential, and real-world experience should be the focus when making hiring decisions. We're here to challenge the norm and rewrite the rules of hiring. So let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Looks Good on Paper podcast. I'm Anita Chohan, your co-host, and here's my other co-host today, Woody. And we're talking.
Hi, everyone.
And we're talking to Martin Hauck. Martin is a fractional HR consultant at the Purple Umbrella and a community builder and the founder of the People Group.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on today. Yeah, I'm Martin, founder of the People Group, and it's a community of 5,000 plus HR recruitment and operations professionals across North America. And Purple Umbrella is a fractional consultancy where we help startups and scale-ups with all their people ops challenges. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. I feel like you're the perfect person to talk to this sort of stuff about. And I know you know the premise of our beautiful, cute podcast that we're doing. We're trying to be a little pithy and a little fun and talk about just, the challenges that we have as, people working and looking at like resumes and understanding scenarios where, someone looked good on paper and then didn't, or vice versa. And let's jump in and talk about our first question. So what's the biggest hiring mistake companies keep making, even though it's clearly not working?
I think the biggest mistake that companies make is just assuming that not reinventing or modernizing their approach to hiring, right? There's all these new tools out there. There's all these new tech, AI, obviously we can talk about for days, but the reality is that most companies don't really audit their own process, and they don't audit it as they scale. So what I mean by that, in the sense that like everybody just like knows that an interview is typically 3 to 4, sometimes longer rounds. And, the first interview is very much, like having 4 first interviews is not the way to go. That's the TLDR. So, and that's what a lot of companies do. It's just like, they don't have a structure. They don't have a cadence. They don't say, okay, after the first interview, you're going to meet with this person. And when you meet with this person, they're going to ask very specific questions. So most companies aren't very thoughtful. They kind of like leave hiring as like an aside because it's so much busy work at the business and so much like, well, I got to get work done, but hiring people effectively is the most important exercise you do as a leader. So not reinventing or even just being thoughtful of like how to design your recruitment and hiring process. It would be probably the biggest mistake. A lot of upfront work, but it pays off in dividends if you take care to it.
Yeah, definitely. I work with a lot of startups, and I'm sure you see them too. And I think about how people inherit bad habits too. So they bring them over from their other companies. Maybe they worked at a big organization, things became entrenched to your point, and they never audit. And then they just literally take that, pick it up, come to a new company, drop it in, and there we go. And they're stuck. They get back into something.
Yeah, I like the Starbucks example of like, this is how we do things here. In the sense that like, as a consumer, I still have to say like a grande or a venti, right? Like this is how they do it here. And that's how you, and that's the process. You learn that somehow, I guess. We all figure it out. And so companies need to be like that as well. It's like, this is how we hire at company XYZ. And we do it differently, and we do it differently for maybe they're going to have a better reason for changing up the names on like the size of a container. But, at the end of the day, if you have a good, meaningful reason behind it, people are going to buy into it that much more as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think about like employer branding, and it's kind of like, don't you want to also be known? Like the marketer in me is just like, this is your opportunity to also shine and get those great people in the door. So I wonder about that. Like, okay, so Martin, you deal with a lot of these people, the people group, you have like, 5,000 people who probably do this job exactly. What is something that you've seen maybe potentially positive that people can do to help audit quickly, or any tips you have?
tips on improving their like framework and structure. I mean, the first thing to start with is an audit. And almost, I would say if I worked at a startup right now, I technically am a startup, I have two, but those are completely different audiences and they probably care about different things during the candidate life cycle. Starting from the place of like, what does our ideal candidate want from this experience and how can we give it to them at the same time as assessing them as a candidate.
I love that. I love it because it's almost like, you're doing user research. It's designing user research.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
You are. That's awesome. Okay. So what's a hidden bias companies unknowingly have even when they think they're progressive in their hiring?
I would say, and unfortunately, it's just like all the standard biases that we've been working against, whether it's recency bias of like, oh, I just met this person at an event, they're going to be incredible. Like, yes, maybe that's the case, but why are you fast tracking this person through the process because you just met them in person versus like looking at the 500 applicants that have applied? Well, it's easier because 500 applicants to review is a lot more of like a mountain to climb than it is to be like, oh, I met this in person. They were great. I really liked their attitude.
Job done.
Yeah.
Move
Yeah.
on.
Boom. And I resonate. Like I understand and I appreciate that bias, but it's still like there's 500 people that apply to your job kind of deal. Like that's not necessarily fair to them. It's not an equitable process if you do it that way. And most companies still kind of like fall into this trap. So I would say that's like recency bias is one. There's a ton of biases. They all sneak in some way, shape, or form, unfortunately. So it takes time and effort to like combat them.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the point I would just like really highlight is that every single recruiter, but also at the top table, every single company, director, owner, CEO needs to see their candidates as customers, not as candidates, right? That is like, you would never imagine or dream of treating an actual customer the way that some of us treat a candidate. Like it would just, you would get fired immediately if you let a customer just float off into the distance and you were a salesperson, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's just a really great mindset trick to tell yourself that these are customers, not candidates.
It's true.
Yeah. Big plus one to that from experience when I worked at CoinSquare, which was a cryptocurrency exchange. To your point, every candidate was a potential customer, especially given crypto, especially at that time, was like very popular and going through a hype train cycle. And we kind of wanted them to be our users as well, right? So like I was customer success or future customer success as well as a recruiter at the same time. So like when we would kind of going back to being thoughtful about the process is like when we would reject candidates, we would give them a list of like resources, say like, hey, here's some other resources to help you in your job search. And by the way, like we hope you enjoyed the process. Like, can you give us some feedback if you didn't? Yeah. And then on top of that, like, here's $10 that you can use on our platform if you're interested in trading crypto. Yeah, so it's like three very specific things that we did as an organization to get away from the whole, like, I'm sorry, at this time we're moving forward with other candidates. Yeah. Thank you. Kind regards. And then their name is like first name.
That's amazing.
There's a great, for anybody that wants to read a great case study outside of what you've just said, Martin, which was awesome. You should Google the Virgin Media case study of how much money they lost from a bad candidate experience, because it was like 7% of their candidates rejected were Virgin Media customers. And that's a lot of candidates or customers.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth a read. They actually worked out the whole thing and how much it cost them.
Insane. I think about that a lot too. It's like I, again, play my marketing brain on. I think about them as brand ambassadors, right? What's that going to look like? You see the reviews on Glassdoor. I mean, there's a whole like Glassdoor mafia. I believe in this conspiracy. People delete stuff, but I really like. I think about that where it's like, you have a bad candidate experience. They're going to go tell somebody else. They're going to talk about it, and even if they get rejected with kindness, similarly to what you did at CoinSquare, I think like they would go ahead and be like, okay, you know what? Like I wasn't the right fit. That's okay. But oh my goodness, they took care of me. They thought about me. They thought about my experience. And now I'm going to go forth and talk about the brand in a positive light. And and then thinking about what you're saying, Woody, about like the cost that, Virgin Media paid, there's also the brand cost as well that comes with that. So it's just, I guess, ipso facto, treat them as a customer. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Do the user research, to your point earlier, Martin, and treat them as if they're a potential salesperson in sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To Woody's point as well, in the sense that like maybe on the product manager side that I'd mentioned, like another team to like get cozy with and figure out how they do things is customer success as well. Be like, hey, these are potential customers. Is there anything we should be factoring in? And we ended up working to be able to get them that referral code that got them the $10. We had to work with our CSM team as well in the first place because they were the ones that own that area of the business.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So we're on our second last question. What's the most surprising hire you've ever made? And how do their success defy what looked good on paper, or vice versa?
When I worked at Case, where I was tasked with building out the recruitment team, just like from scratch, essentially, because we went from like 2 recruiters to 8 recruiters in the span of like 2 months, because we just like there's an investment made and a hiring plan, and we just didn't have the team for the hiring plan. And there was this person that kept popping up on my feed on LinkedIn, but it was also in the community. I keep seeing your name, but also there was like, I have this like personal bias against folks. So sorry if either of you have this in your LinkedIn profile. I've changed my bias over the years, but like anytime somebody calls themselves like a visionary or like a guru or anything like that, I have like an allergic reaction at first to it. And like his profile picture was like him staring off into the distance and like some, I don't know. And I was just like, I wanted to meet with him because like everything his content was saying was like really good, and every once in a while it was a little too cheeky for my liking, but like you could tell that he was like thinking hard about stuff. And on paper, he wasn't actually a recruiter. He was a job developer on the other hand. So he would help new immigrants land jobs with companies but he'd never done any actual tangible recruiting. I would say the Venn diagram I can't do a Venn diagram with my hands, but you get the point. The Venn diagram of those skill sets is very overlapped. Like there's slivers on each side where it's like skills that aren't there. But it was definitely a risk for me to hire him. And his name's Chengir Lee, and he's literally the best recruiter I've ever hired in my life so far. I've hired a bunch, like 20, 30 plus recruiters in my career. And the thing that stands out about him was like at the time, our velocity and like track record for hiring was like, it would take 60 to 90 days to make a hire, which is pretty like kind of like standard, sometimes longer. And then the other piece that was the most challenging was that it would take like most recruiters couldn't like close more than like 2 candidates a month. And this like persisted for everyone on the team. Like on the dev and engineering side, like 2 strong senior developers is like a good track record. One, at least for myself and for my opinion. I called him. I tried to surprise him on Slack because I was just like, I need to know who this person is, without preparation kind of deal. Yeah. And the bet was worth it. The risk was worth it. So.
And I know Chengir, and he's phenomenal, and he's a great part of the community, and he's obviously very knowledgeable and knows what he does, and that's amazing. That's it. You take a chance and see, and this shook out, and he turned out to be like a super recruiter.
None of those skill sets showed up on his LinkedIn profile. None of those skill sets, then nothing would have said, even if you put visionary recruiter, he has the legitimacy to say that, but again, it's like, it's just not believable. You know what I mean? So
I think that's such a poignant thing to sort of finish the comment on, is when something looks good on paper, even if it is true, quite often we wouldn't believe it anyway. Yeah. Like if he'd have put legendary recruiter on
which he is,
his resume or LinkedIn, or I close 12 candidates per month. Everybody reads it and goes, that is BS.
Yeah.
That could
Yeah.
never happen.
Yeah. Too often people are abusing it, right? People are.
Exactly. 72% of the time. So I feel bad for the 28% that never lie on their LinkedIn or resumes.
As our last and final question, just riffing off what you had shared just now, how can we find more Changearlies? How can a recruiter maybe look differently at candidates, and what advice would you give them?
I mean, going back to my like own biases, I had a Chrome extension called Unbiasify back in the day where it would remove a person's name and their LinkedIn profile. It's like try to focus on the core aspect of the person's CV in the sense that like you start from there, but like remove the things that like make you biased in the first place if you can. Beyond that, I would say create good biases as well. Like ones that don't necessarily screen out people from like a perspective of their background or anything, but more from what are some signals that I can like rely on that are helpful for this particular type of role. So from a recruitment perspective, one that's very good is the job developer. Folks that have worked in organizations like a school and they helped people get their first internship or co-op placement type folks. We've hired a bunch of folks with that experience and that background. Another one that stands out, another hire that's like one of my favorites, but like lends itself well to answer this question. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was more of like a thesis. But Kari, she writes our newsletter for the People group, and she's an HR consultant herself now at Bright and Early. And she's incredible just as an HR person. When she applied to work for the company I was at previously, her background and experience was largely like Starbucks, literally. And she was sort of like a de facto interim district manager that would look after like the 3 most like crazy stores in Toronto in terms of like the patrons that would come in and the kind of things that she would have to like put up with from customers. And so there's a ton of, so like when it comes to HR, like a hospitality, customer service, retail oriented background is very helpful because you're thinking of kind of what we've talked about. The theme to a certain extent is like you want to think of everybody that comes through the door as a customer and treat them as such. And so that is a very helpful mindset to have and like a baked in core philosophy. But again, you don't usually put in like 5 years of experience in hospitality for an HR role, right? So finding those other things, those other experiences where you can say, oh, this person's going to have great customer experience, right? Hiring executive assistants from challenging environments like a Rogers call center or something like that, right? Because they're constantly putting out fires, and it's actually refreshing probably to get out of like a Rogers call center and work with a CEO, to be honest with you. So like that's kind of those are like looking, I don't know how to synthesize it in like a distinct way, but I feel like folks listening can kind of understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, get those pauses, signals, recognize other biases. And I know we already did the wild card, but it's just got to ask, how do you feel about the CV, and do you foresee a CV-free world in the future?
I wish we moved away from it. It's frustrating as hell that we're still using some format that was made like it's the equivalent of like somebody like listening to like old folk music from like 200 years ago. It's like we deserve to modernize. Like, sure, if that's like an historical, like as in like they deserve to be in museums. That's my TLDR. Deserves a bit of a shakeup, I would say.
Get
a little
out
bit.
here.
In petit peu.
Un petit peu. We are vehemently in favor of getting rid of the CV or decentering it. So thank you so much, Martin, for all your thoughts, your insights, and being a good sport with all the questions we threw your way. Always a pleasure to talk with you, and talk soon.
Thanks so much. Martin.
Cheers.
So thanks for tuning in to Looks Good on Paper. We hope today's conversation helps you rethink what really matters when it comes to hiring. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your network, and stay tuned for more insightful discussions that are shaking up the entire hiring process. Catch us next time as we continue to challenge the status quo. Until then, remember, it's not what looks good on paper, it's what they can do.